She has built up her fame on a platform of morality and decency and Christian values and family values. And here she is at a play that is geared towards everyone, but it's Beetlejuice, it's a family friendly show. And she's doing things that are just simply not family friendly. Lauren Boebert's removal from a play at a Denver theater has drawn sharp criticism and claims of hypocrisy as videos of her vaping, disrupting the play, and being sexually promiscuous with her boyfriend hit the internet. Is Boebert's platform of family friendliness a facade? Does she deserve the criticism she is getting, and what might be the deeper cause of her actions? Lauren Boebert has really risen to prominence by holding strong to Christian values, being very open about those things. She is a cultural warrior, especially against some of the sexual ideologies that are going on. Anything sexual, sexual ideology, sexual ideas, sexual teachings that are going into schools. She just stands super firmly against all that stuff. She's been a very eccentric character. She has been, as I understand it, extremely loyal to Donald Trump. I think that is still the case. And she just made news because she went to the play Beetlejuice in Denver at a large theater. And let's just have a look at this report showing some of what she was up to.
Security video from a weekend performance of Beetlejuice, where the congresswoman was kicked out of the theater for being disruptive. The DCPA says she was vaping. Boebert's team denied that, said the haze was from fog machines in the show. That claim goes up in smoke when you see the video. The pregnant woman sitting behind Boebert told the Denver Post she asked her to stop vaping, and Boebert refused. Her one-woman show continued, taking flash photos, raising her hands and dancing, often the only one clapping or standing up in the crowd. Boebert occasionally took a break from being disruptive to enjoy the company of her male companion. He briefly had a grasp. All
right, so we're not going to go into all of that. Basically, she gets felt up by her boyfriend. She, reciprocates his advances. And this created a firestorm, not just because it's a congresswoman who is being disruptive and wild and immature. More than that, it is because she has built up her fame on a platform of morality and decency and Christian values and family values. And here she is at a play that is geared towards everyone, but it's Beetlejuice, it's a family friendly show. And she's doing things that are just simply not family friendly. First of all, if you vape, stop vaping. Okay. If you vape, no, don't do that. Right. I don't, not because of health benefit. I don't even know. I don't know if it's healthy or not. It's for children. Right. And if you're a child, don't vape. You're like the coolest 9th grade girl if you vape in the bathroom. Okay. Also the dumbest because you're going to go to jail. But I don't know. Maybe I'm ancient and I'm just out of the loop and you love vaping. So good for you, but don't vape. Like if you're a congressperson and you want to be taken seriously, like you want to create the legislation that guides 350 million people, quit vaping in public, and lying about it. Her behavior, if you're watching on YouTube and you just saw the dancing and the flash photography and just almost a feeling of being above the rules somehow, it is so off-putting. It's so off-putting. In Hebrews, it says, remember your leaders who spoke the word of God to you. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. Now, this part of Hebrews is actually talking about the great cloud of witnesses, the leaders who have gone before you, the people who lived for God and were moral and just and righteous. But the opposite can also be taken out of this. Remember the leaders who spoke the word of God to you and consider the outcome of their way of life. Consider it if it didn't match up what they preached in the public square, and do not imitate their version of faith. I think what we see more and more often is a world that is going away from God on all sides of the political aisle. And, Republicans, the GOP, the grand old party, when I was growing up, the joke was the GOP stood for God's only party, right? So, wow, tough joke, The truth is that there are believers in Jesus on both sides of the aisle. The more people get entrenched into their ideologies, the stereotype of Republicans being people who love God, guns, and country becomes probably more and more realistic, that on the right, you're more likely to find someone who has some transcendent grounding. part of the reason for that is that many of the left's ideologies are rooted in a belief that there is no objective truth. And this relativistic mindset and worldview can't have a creator God in it. You can't actually hold to moral subjectivity and relativistic truth if there is a transcendent God, because that transcendent God would be the arbiter of all truth and reason and morality. So if there is God, then there is objective truth. And so much of the left has gone away from objective truth. And so I think that that's kind of how things end up splitting out. And it's not perfect. And there are many wonderful, beautiful believers in Jesus who hold more left-leaning views on whole host of issues. And we are also seeing in a world, in a country that's going further and further from God, there are more and more people on the right who still hold strongly and are huge advocates for the Judeo-Christian worldview and moral and ethical framework, but don't actually believe in God in their real life. And just to be very clear, I'm not putting that on Lauren Boebert. I wouldn't put that on anyone I don't actually know. She's claiming to be a Christian. And so sometimes you can be a Christian and just have really bad theology that leads you to do things that, for all appearances, are quite hypocritical to what you say you believe and how you're acting in the world. Let me give some other benefit of the doubt. And we try to do this for everyone on all sides on the Clayton Tyner podcast. We try to have nuanced views, right? Maybe she had a wild night out, and so is that an excuse? Yeah. She said, I'm an eccentric person. I didn't like her apology. I'm an eccentric person. I kind of just got to me, that's a non-apology that says this is actually a pattern. And so maybe you could make the case, everyone makes bad choices every once in a while. You're also a leader of our country. And so I hold you to a higher standard. The question about people who hold to Judeo-Christian worldview without actively following God in their life, or hold to the principles of Judeo-Christian moral and ethical framework, but don't really believe in God or follow God at all. The question is, do the ends justify the means? So Lauren Boebert has been historically very loyal to Donald Trump. Trump came in and he won the overwhelming majority of the evangelical Christian vote. And I think when he won in 2016, this is my read on it, I'm not a professional political commentator, that most people who were Christians, they had an attitude of, I'm going to choose the lesser of two evils from my perspective, and I'm not super happy about his moral stances. I'm not super happy about his history with women. I'm not super happy about him being a potty mouth and a playboy, but a lesser of two evils. Somehow, between then and now, we have this rhetoric around our culture about Trump being the Messiah, Trump being sent from God, him being one of the Old Testament prophets who, they were really rough around the edges, but they were doing God's work. The Old Testament prophets were godly men. The Old Testament prophets were not perfect, like all people are not perfect, but they were seeking to follow God very actively. And look, people change. I mean, we're going to talk about that later in the podcast. And maybe genuinely he has changed. But I will say, even this week, he's in 2 different interviews where some of the things that I think many people believe he holds firmly to, like on issues of pro-life and some issues in the sphere of sexual ideology, he's really wavered on, and he seems to kind of go back and forth. And so look, last week, people were commenting saying that I'm a right-wing, whatever. This week, people who really love Trump are probably not going to be super happy with me. But here's the deal. One of Trump's indictments, and I think from legal standing, this indictment it's not efficacious. It shouldn't be in the courts, but it is. And one of them is hush money payment to a porn star that Donald Trump had sex with. And here's what's wild is that the people who are on the right and can't come to a nuanced view and could never admit this, they're upset because they're claiming that was a campaign finance violation, and they're saying it's not. And I think looking at it legally, I think they're probably right. What's wild is that that's what we're upset about. We're not upset about the person who has never come out and apologized for this, unless he has. And if he has, put it in the comments, and I'm sorry. Hasn't come and had a change of mind, hasn't done anything but belittle this woman who he chose to engage in a sexual affair with. Like, that's the standard bearer. And so Lauren Boebert, role models matter. Who you surround yourself with matters. And so we have potential massive corruption with our leader on the left. We have some serious moral issues with our person on the right. I do think we're going to be back in a situation where everyone left, right, and center are trying to choose the lesser of two evils. And I hope everyone can really think through that. But how are we here? I think the question for people who have leaders who are trying to stand on Christian principles and Christian values, ethics, and morals, but aren't actively living a Christian life is, do the ends justify the means? And there's some pretty specific scriptures about that. Romans 3:8 says, why not say, as some slanderously claim that we say, let us do evil that good may result? The ends will justify the means. Their condemnation is just. No one gets to say, we'll do bad things, but we'll get good results. We'll stand on this publicly, but we won't hold to it privately. It just doesn't work. Proverbs says, whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. A lot of what people point to in issues like this, because the response has been very interesting to this video of Lauren Boebert coming out. People on the right have been divided. Some people have said, we should be looking for leaders who have higher standards, who don't say one thing in public and then act completely differently in private. By the way, when she was escorted out, allegedly, and there's a picture of this, she flips off security,
Wow.
And she says, I'm going to call the mayor because I'm a Colorado congresswoman or whatever. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths, they will be found out. If it was one night, if it was a pattern, whatever it is, Lauren Boebert was found out. I mean, it was all caught in 4K, all of the things that she was up to that night and her dismissal and being escorted out of the room. Do the ends justify the means? A lot of people bring up this separation of church and state, that we already have this, it's all programmed in, and, people should just be able to separate these things out perfectly, and they shouldn't even bring their religious ideas into the political sphere. If you actually look at the history of this, which had a lot to do with the Anabaptists, the separation of church and state was not to keep the church out of the state. It was to keep the state out of the churches. That is the point of it. In other words, Christian leaders should bring their Christian principles to their governance. The founding fathers knew that very, very clearly. What we shouldn't have is the institutions of the government telling the churches what they can and can't do at all, ever. And so what's disappointing is when we see what seems like a facade of Christian governance, Christian leadership, and then we see evidence that points to it the other way. Kind of the key theme, I think, throughout our whole conversation today is, what is our expectation of leaders? And when are we, as a people who our leaders in government are supposed to represent, demand that we have people of higher quality? I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Clayton Tyner podcast. If you want to watch the full podcast, you can check that out somewhere right around here. And if you want to subscribe, you can do that right over here somewhere. Also, you can follow me at Clayton Tyner. That's Tyner on Twitter and Instagram. I would love for you to subscribe to the channel so you can keep up with everything that we're doing.